Coming up next is Dr. Kimberly Taylor. Here's your chance to talk about what matters to you. Although you will receive helpful advice from Dr. Taylor, remember, this is not to be construed as a form of psychotherapy, diagnosis, or treatment, and cannot replace a therapeutic relationship with a mental health professional. You can reach Dr. Taylor by calling 564-1290 or toll free at 866-564-1290. You can also listen live on the internet at drkimtaylorshow.com. So here now is Dr. Kimberly Taylor.
It's April, and that means that it's also National Alcohol Awareness Month. Now, for most people, drinking alcohol is really nothing more than a pleasant way to relax. But our research shows us that an estimated 23 million Americans struggle with addiction. Alcohol addiction is a disease, and it includes alcohol cravings as well as continued drinking despite repeated problems such as losing a job or having relationship problems or even getting into trouble with the law. And it also includes the following 4 symptoms. The first one is cravings, and this is a strong need or compulsion to drink no matter what. Then there's impaired control. And this is the inability to limit your drinking on any given occasion. The next one is physical dependence. And this is having withdrawal symptoms, very physical ones, such as nausea, sweating, shakiness, and even anxiety when you stop using alcohol, especially after a period of heavy drinking. And then there's the tolerance. And this is the need for increasing amounts of alcohol just in order to feel the same effects. So many people who are struggling with alcohol dependence or abuse seek out Alcoholics Anonymous or its sister program, Narcotics Anonymous, as part of their recovery program. Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA, has been considered the standard of treatment for recovering addicts since its very beginning in 1935, when its founder, Bill Wilson, met Bob Smith, and soon they published what has become known as the Big Book. And this spells out their philosophy and the principles, along with the methods, including the now famous 12-step method that is the core of Alcoholics Anonymous for treating addiction problems. And in recent decades, the 12 steps have been applied to other addictions, everything from drugs, food, and other substances, to various compulsive behaviors around gambling and sex. And now even a number of rehabilitation centers focus on the 12-step method and urge their members that are in recovery to continue attending meetings on a regular basis to maintain their sobriety, even after treatment ends. So today we are going to be talking about the 12-step programs and how to seek out help for yourself or even someone that you know that's struggling with an addiction problem. In the 12-step meetings, the members meet in groups, and the intent is to help one another to achieve and maintain abstinence from their addiction. The meetings are free, and they're open to anyone who's really serious about their own sobriety. Members can get up and they can share their own stories. They often read from the Big Book, and they often discuss this 12-step themes as they relate to addiction and maintaining sobriety. Oftentimes, people who are addicted are very disconnected in their own lives, so the 12 steps can be a profound way of reconnecting by helping other people to start to reconnect on an emotional level with other people. Now, it can be very intimidating to have to walk into an AA meeting for the very first time. So today I have with me someone who has been a long-standing member in AA, and he's here willing to share his own experience in order to help us all to understand what the inner workings are of AA. There is no one spokesperson for AA, but members do and they can share their own personal experiences so that someone seeking help will have a better understanding of what they might expect by going to a meeting and also how to get the help that they need. So today, if you have a question and if you would like to call in, we are going to be here for the next hour. You can reach us by calling 564-1290 or toll-free number at 866-564-1290. You can also send an email question by going to Dr. Kim at drkimtaylorshow.com. So stay with me while we take this quick break, and I will be right back with my guests to start the conversation and to take your calls. I'm Kimberly Taylor, and you're listening to KZSB AM 1290.
You are listening to Dr. Kimberly Taylor. You can reach her by calling 564-1290 or toll free at 866-564-1290.
Today we are talking about the 12-step programs, and this is April, and it's National Alcohol Awareness Month. So I'm very pleased to have with me Jim, who is a longstanding member of AA, and he has agreed to come on and talk to us about some of the ins and outs of what AA is about and what you can expect if you were to join or to go in. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
Yes. One of the first questions I have is, what I know is that for most people, walking into something that they don't know is going to be very scary for them. So I am wondering if you could just explain some of the common aspects of what an AA meeting is and what people could and should expect.
There are generally two kinds of meetings, speaker meetings and discussion meetings. The speaker meeting is one where a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous or two get up in front of a room full of wannabe sober alcoholics and shares their story, tells their life story, how they drank and how they got sober. And then the discussion meetings are those where a number of alkies sit around in a circle and share their own personal stories, short and brief summary fashion.
So if someone was to go for the first time, what are the first steps that they would take?
I would simply suggest that you get a directory. You can get that directory from central office here in Santa Barbara at 1213 State Street. Phone number is 962-3332. Go down and get a directory and find a speaker meeting. That would be my first suggestion. And just go in and sit in the back and listen. You won't have to identify yourself. You won't have to say hello, goodbye, or anything to anybody. Just listen and hear a sober alcoholic telling his or her story.
When they go to that meeting, what is going to happen first?
First of all, the leader of the meeting that evening will get up and they'll read the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and sometimes they'll read the short form of the 12 traditions, which are the principles that the groups go by. Mm-hmm. And then they will have a short break, and then they will introduce the main speaker. And the speaker will speak for 20 or 30 or 40 minutes, and then they will pray and they will go home.
So tell us a bit first, how did AA get started?
AA got started with a drunken stockbroker in New York City, a man named Bill Wilson, who in 1934, late 34, met a guy named Bob Smith, who was a medical doctor. He was a proctologist, of all things. And Bill had learned a little earlier that it just sort of came to him that the only way he was ever going to stay sober was to share his experience with another drunk. And so he was introduced to Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob had a few false starts. He got drunk a few times after Bill met him and told him his story. And then Dr. Bob got sober on June 10, 1935. And that is kind of the birth date of Alcoholics Anonymous. Mm-hmm. He stayed sober the rest of his life. So did Bill Wilson.
What was it that they did? They did create the 12-step.
Actually, the steps didn't come along for a while after that.
Okay.
Bill wrote the 12 steps. Mm-hmm. Up to in the very beginning, the essence of AA was simply one drunk sharing his story with another drunk. And that's how Bill Wilson got the story. He was 12-stepped, as we call it, by a guy named Ebby Thatcher, who was going to be committed permanently for alcoholism by a judge. Mm-hmm. And a man named Roland Hazard and the judge's son came into the judge's chambers and said, let us have a whack at this Ebby Thatcher guy. Mm-hmm. The judge almost didn't let him take him with him. He almost committed him permanently for alcoholism, which would have been we'd have a different speaker here today probably if that happened.
Yes.
But anyway, Ebby Thatcher went and told his story of recovery in the Oxford groups to Bill Wilson. Mm-hmm. And the Oxford groups were non-denominational Christian groups back at that time, which Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob belonged to. Mm-hmm. That was the original group of AA. But they couldn't take the religious aspect of it. They got into conflict with the absolutism of the Oxford groups.
Okay.
So they split off.
And as they split off, tell me about how then the 12 steps became.
Bill Wilson wrote the 12 steps on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just came out of his own psyche, and started sharing them with other alcoholics. And that's really how it started.
Okay, so this has really become a cornerstone of what the 12-step program in AA is about, correct?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So tell us how the 12 steps work.
12 steps work in this way. If the person who wants to be sober, usually with the help of a sponsor, although it's not absolutely necessary, a sponsor is just another sober alcoholic who's had quite a bit of experience, who guides the newcomer through the 12 steps. Make sure that they touch all the bases. They don't fudge here and fudge there, because we're the world's greatest rationalizers and justifiers. Mm-hmm. And the sponsor, we call him a sponsor, guides the person through step 1 through 12. And the purpose of doing this is to produce a spiritual awakening in the sponsee, the newcomer.
Okay, now you're smiling when you say that. How come?
Well, I'm smiling because a lot of people misunderstand what a spiritual awakening is.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Wilson claimed to have had a sudden illuminating experience where the room lit up with a white light and he heard voices, and he hadn't had a drink after that. That doesn't happen to a lot of people. Some people it still happens to. Appendix 2 of what we call the Big Book, the Alcoholics Anonymous textbook, describes a spiritual experience as a psychic change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. Mm-hmm. It's nothing more mysterious than that. It's not too much of a woo-woo bird deal.
But the point is, and you brought this up, is that the person has to be willing to come in and get help. No one can do this for them.
True enough, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. In fact, we describe it sometimes as the gift of desperation. Mm-hmm. Many people have to be pretty far down the road before they're willing to do the things that we have to do to stay sober.
Mm-hmm. So that's really the first step. They have to be willing to agree to come to get the help.
Yes, and
Okay.
they have to admit that they're powerless, totally powerless over alcohol, and that their life has become unmanageable. That's the very first step.
That is the first step. And is that a hard one for most people to take?
It's a hard one. It's the only one you have to take perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't think you're beaten by alcohol, you're not going to stop drinking. If you think you still got a handle on it, you're going to keep drinking.
Okay.
Just that simple.
So do they go through these steps, the first one, the second one, the third one, and they have to get the first one before they move on to the second one?
That's correct.
So there is some kind of order to it.
There is an order to it, of course. Yeah, you can't do the 12th step until you've done all the other steps. 12th step is where you carry the message to other alcoholics.
And that is, in fact, what you're doing today.
Exactly.
Tell us how that helps you.
Well, I haven't had a drink for 42 years.
Congratulations. and actually, you told me that your birthday for that was just last week?
Last Sunday.
Last Sunday,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It's a long dry spell, as we say. But it's necessary, in my opinion, to take the 12 steps mm-hmm. and to continue to take the last 3 steps. That's 10, 11, and 12. Continue to take personal inventory. That's where we write down our character defects.
That's step 10.
That's 10. And 11 is praying and meditating. That's the least honored step in AA. Most people don't pray much or meditate much, but you have to do a little bit of it anyway. And the 12th step is carrying the message to other alcoholics.
And so this has worked for you?
It surely has, yeah.
Okay.
Nothing else worked for me.
So this is really the treatment of choice for you
For me,
and the one that you believe works best.
Well, it is, yeah, and I'm obviously prejudiced because it's worked for me for 42 years. And I don't know anybody else that's been in any other program that's worked for 42 years. That's just because many of these programs, I'm sure, haven't been around. They weren't around when I got sober.
Mm-hmm. We are going to take a quick break, but we are going to be back. And if you would like to call or if you have a question, you can call us at 564-1290 or go to the toll-free number at 866-564-1290. We'll be right back after the break. I'm Kimberly Taylor, and you're listening to KZSB AM 1290.
You are listening to Dr. Kimberly Taylor. You can reach her by calling 564-1290 or toll-free at 866-564-1290.
We are back, and I'm here with my guest, Jim, who is a member of AA, and we are talking about the 12-step programs. And you have been a member now, you say, for 42 years, so
Correct.
This program has worked for you.
Indeed.
So I have a lot of questions about AA, like, for instance, who runs AA?
Nobody runs AA.
Nobody runs AA.
Well, the official answer is that the group conscience is the ultimate authority, and it's just a democratic process where you take a vote, and whatever the group wants to do by a majority vote, that's the group conscience, and that's how they decide what they're going to do.
So when you walk into a meeting, there are no leaders, so how is it begun?
Well, there will be a temporary chairman or leader for that meeting only, and it carries no legal authority of any kind. That's just so that they're not all talking at once, essentially. And they do have a tendency to talk at once. But the leader gets up and runs it according to a fairly loose format.
And part of the premise also, from what I've heard, is that it is also meant that everyone then is seen as an equal. There are no...
Absolutely, and this is not always completely understood by some of our little egocentric members, but the highest rank you will ever attain in Alcoholics Anonymous is sober. That's the highest rank you'll ever attain. There's no captains, kings, priests, rabbis, ministers. There's no authoritative figures, although some members who are not totally recovered will try to appoint themselves as fearless leaders.
And how then are those brought back to
They're
the
usually
equal
ignored.
arena? They're usually ignored.
ignored.
Okay. What does it cost to join AA?
Zero, not a dime.
Okay.
It's the AA program is supported totally by voluntary contributions by its members. They pass the hat at the meetings. You throw in $1 or $2 or whatever you want to throw in, but it doesn't accept any outside contributions whatsoever from non-alcoholics. You can't leave your farm to AA if you're a non-alcoholic. You could if you were a member of AA, but I think they have a sort of an informal limit on how much they'll accept from one person. They definitely try to stay out of problems of money, property, and prestige. That's one of the killers for alcoholics.
Why is that?
Well, we're egomaniacs, a lot of us, and self-will run riot, and we're always trying to get to the top of the heap, and that's one of the reasons we drank, because of our incessant ego demands, and so we have to humble ourselves a little bit in order to stay sober.
Can you speak more about those demands of the ego, about what really presses people to drink, to use in that way? What is it that they're trying to get?
They're trying to fill some enormous vacuum in their psyche, and they'll fill it with anything, sex, alcohol, drugs, religion, whatever it might be. They're desperately trying to fill this tremendous vacuum, and no one really knows, no one that I know knows exactly why some people have this enormous emptiness in them.
How do you see that the 12-step programs and what you do there, how does it feed that, or how does it heal that?
One of the things that it heals is the propensity to be dishonest that we have as alcoholics. Many of us are liar, cheats, and thieves because we will do whatever we have to do to get alcohol or drugs. Some people do that with drugs. But the program, in its own words, demands rigorous honesty. And that's a hard call for some alcoholics, who are used to, shucking and jiving out there to get alcohol.
Are there any rules when you go into a 12-step program?
Just don't disrupt the meeting. That's about the only, and that isn't even a spoken rule. It's just common sense, Don't go in drunk and raise hell in the meeting. That's pretty standard stuff.
And what would happen if one did?
Well, they would, a couple of old-timers would guide you gently out the door, talk to you about your problem with alcohol.
I think that a lot of people ask, is this a religious sect? Is it a cult? Is there something that you have to believe in a higher power in order to be able to be a member of this?
There are no rules, and there are no beliefs that you have to espouse. The 12 steps themselves are suggested steps by definition. In the big book, it describes the steps as suggested steps. You don't have to take the steps. You don't have to go to meetings. You don't have to do anything. You might not stay sober, It's like either you take these suggestions or you go and die of alcoholism. That's kind of like the alternative. But there are no musts like that in AA.
But I think that for a lot of people, they feel that if they can't take that part of it, that there is a higher power, that there is a God, that these steps will not be helpful to them.
Not true. I know a number of people who don't believe in God at all, who were sober a long time.
Okay, so the
They
higher
use
power
the
then
group.
becomes what?
They use the group as their higher power.
Can it also be within themselves, to come from a higher
Yes,
place
it
within
is.
themselves?
But that is correct. And I heard a guy at a meeting on last Monday, say that he's his own higher power. That's a little risky
Why?
for us because, well, we're egomaniacs, and we're a lot more likely to be listening to our ego than we are to the higher power within.
So there are a number of different kinds of 12-step programs. There are a number of different kinds of groups in any
Yes.
city. So how many groups are in the Santa Barbara County?
Well, I'm sure there's men's groups, women's groups, closed groups, open groups. There are gay groups, all kinds of different groups. And as we kind of crudely say, there's a wrench for every nut in AA. So you can find a meeting that will fit you somewhere trying.
So let's talk about finding that group that fits you. For Santa Barbara County, we know that there is a Santa Barbara County Office of AA that they can
Central
contact,
office.
and you have that number there with you.
Right, I'll give it to you again in case somebody wants to call it. It's 962-3332.
And I will also have that on my website. But they can call that number and then find a meeting. Does it run 7 days a week?
7 days a week,
And
365 days a year.
so there's always a meeting close by. And so when they would call the chapter, they might ask for a teen meeting, or they might ask
Yes.
for a meeting that had gays. What are the other types of meetings? You said that there's an open and closed meetings. What are
Open
those two?
meetings are for anyone that is interested in alcoholism. You don't have to be an alcoholic. Closed meetings are only for those who have a desire to stop drinking. And by the way, that is the only requirement for membership in Alcoholics Anonymous, that you have a desire to stop drinking. You don't have to actually stop drinking. If you have a desire, you can go to a meeting and you are as high on the totem pole as anybody in the meeting.
So anyone can go to any chapter in their city just by finding out that number, and they will have a listing of all the
That's
different
right.
kinds of meetings and a
right.
schedule of when they all meet. Where are all of these meetings held?
Various places, church halls, church basements, hospitals, treatment facilities. They have meetings at, there's a lot of different so-called residential treatment facilities in Santa Barbara. There's Newhouse 2 and 3 and Casa Serena and places like that, and they all have meetings at those places as well.
And how often do people attend AA meetings?
Well, I believe some statistics I've seen lately show that the average alcoholic who is sober will attend 2 to 3 meetings a week. And that's not too many, but that would be quite adequate for most people. I attend 2 or 3 meetings a week.
And because they say that there is not a cure for this, does that mean that people have to actually attend for the rest of their life?
Only if they want to stay sober the rest of their lives.
So the answer is yes, they do need
I
to.
think that's my opinion.
That's been your experience. And
My experience.
once more, what we have to say is that there is no one person that does speak for AA.
That's precisely
that
true.
That a lot of the people might have a similar results as you, but some also can step away from it and
That's
don't
true.
necessarily need to go to a meeting.
I know people like that almost never go to meetings. Yeah.
Tell us about the prayer that they use.
Well, the so-called Serenity Prayer is really stolen from Reinhold Niebuhr, who was a theologian, died in 1971, I believe. And it's just, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think it should be altered a little bit, because you can't know what you can change until you try to change it. So I would have called it the
Trial
courage
and
prayer.
error.
I would have called it the courage prayer. God grant me the courage to change the things I can, the serenity to accept the things I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. But that's just my own personal take on it.
Okay.
It's not an official prayer of Alcoholics Anonymous. They don't have any official prayers. Many of the meetings close their meeting with the Our Father, even though that is a clearly denominational prayer.
Tell us about the sponsors, because what I have heard is that once you join, that at some point in time you're going to want to have a sponsor. What is a sponsor, and how does that sponsor help?
That's an interesting subject to me. A sponsor, in my opinion, and this is generally the opinion of AA, is one who guides the newcomer through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, there are as many types of sponsors as there are human beings. And you will find some sponsors who want to run your whole life. And my advice to people like that is get away from them as fast as you can. Because, just because you're sober in Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't mean you're qualified to run somebody else's life. But essentially, the function of the sponsor is to guide the person through the 12 steps. That's their entire function as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. We don't act as bankers or social workers or psychiatrists or doctors, especially doctors. We have to be careful of that because the pill issue comes up a lot with people, and some sponsors want to tell their sponsees, don't take any pills, period.
Even prescribed pills you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about prescribed pills, and it's a dangerous ground to get into because we're not doctors. Mm-hmm. And there's literature in AA that you can pick up in the meetings about how to handle this other chemicals problem.
And even if the pills are not a problem, but they're being prescribed for another condition?
Alkies will find a way to get high on Vicodin, hydrocodone, OxyContin, all these painkillers when they're not having any pain. Or this is even more subtle and more devastating. They will create the pain they need to get the pills.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've heard of that.
That's scary.
But when we're talking about the sponsor, it is not the sponsor's job to talk to them about a medication that they may be prescribed by a doctor,
true.
But maybe only to encourage them to advise their doctor that they are an alcoholic and they have this problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is the way the AA literature describes it, find a doctor who is familiar with alcoholism.
That's a good point.
And knows that alcoholics have a tendency to grab onto anything that will make them high.
And so the sponsors stay with them for as long as that person needs them and needs the help to get through the 12 steps.
I know people who have sponsors for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've had 5 sponsors.
All right. Well, we are going to take a quick break again, but we will be right back.
Super.
And you can also hear this program in a rebroadcast on Thursday evenings at 10 p.m. or Sundays at 9 a.m. We'll be right back. I'm Kimberly Taylor, and you're listening to KZSB AM 1290.
You are listening to Dr. Kimberly Taylor. You can reach her by calling 564-1290 or toll free at 866-564-1290.
I'm here with my guest, Jim, who is a member of AA, and we are talking about the 12-step programs. One of the things that I did want to put out there is if you want to find a group, that you can go to aa.org and click on how to find the AA meeting in your area, and it will list all of the meetings and all of the times for you to go. So let's talk about the big book. There's a lot of conversation about what that big book is and how people use it within an AA 12-step program.
Mm-hmm. The big book is the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was first published in 1939 by approximately 100 drunks who had been sober for a while. And it's the basic story of the first 164 pages of the big book are text about how the program works, how to do a 4th and 5th step, how to do all the program. And then in the back of the book are a number of personal stories, which are designed to help the new person identify as an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. When you read these stories, if you're an alcoholic, you're going to say, my God, I'm just about like those people. I'm a lot like them. And it's very helpful. In fact, the entire original message of AA was to help the newcomer identify with the speaker as an alcoholic. And that's still the basic hook that brings people into AA. They hear somebody tell their story and they go, oh my God, I'm just like those people.
Well, I would think it's also one of the hooks that have people coming back and being there to be able to help others.
Absolutely right. Helping others is a cornerstone of AA.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed over the years the people that keep getting drunk are people that don't sponsor anybody.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Because
They
they're
don't-
not that invested, or they're not really sharing of themselves and giving of themselves then
The
completely?
latter. They
Okay.
are self-obsessed, which is one of our character defects. And getting out of self is one of our principal objectives, is getting out of self and helping other people.
Getting out of our own head sometimes
Mhm.
is what helps us.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly right. It's
All
a
right.
dangerous territory for a lot of us.
Well, it is, and there's that old joke that the only thing that's wrong with me is about what I'm thinking about me.
That's right.
Okay.
Or I've heard it said, I'm not much, but I'm all I think about.
Yes. Okay, so one of the problems that I'm sure that some people will have is it's hard enough to admit you have this problem, but then to go and admit you have this problem in front of people. So how is confidentiality held, and is it within these groups?
99% of the time it is strictly adhered to by the people in the meetings because, after all, they're in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, I ran into a lawyer that I knew and he was at his first meeting, and he was hiding behind a pillar. And I went over to him and I said, I'm here for the same reason you are, so don't worry about me blowing the whistle on you.
Mm-hmm.
It made him feel a lot more at ease. So everybody's there for the same reason, and they know that there's a certain stigma connected with alcoholism to this day, even though it's diminished somewhat from what it was 40 years ago. You don't want to go into the medical society and say, I'm a practicing alcoholic. That's not a good place to make that announcement. So people can be told that their anonymity will be protected if they go to AA. And
Okay.
99% of the time it's true.
And that is one of the reasons also that it's just the first name basis, correct?
Yes, of course. Some people never disclose their last names. They're just Bill or Polly or whatever, and that's all we ever know by.
Can you speak about the fear that people have about revealing their addiction? Is
Oh,
that
boy.
one of the biggest problems to
It
get
is a
through?
huge problem. I had to drive all the way to Beverly Hills to go to AA from Ojai. I was afraid somebody would find out I was trying to clean up my act. Isn't that an odd sort of thing? I didn't mind them seeing me drunk every night in the bar,
Uh-huh.
but I did mind them thinking I was going to go clean up my act.
Because that would mean that you really had a problem.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay. What happens if you do have a slip or a relapse? How is it managed within the AA groups?
We just keep going back to the meetings. You just get back on the horse.
Well, but how do the other members feel about someone who continues to relapse?
Most of them have had the same experience, so they can't be too critical.
Okay, so that is actually a part of the recovery process.
Actually, it's not. I hear in some of these $68,000 a month drying out places that relapse is part of recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Relapse is not part of recovery. We call it a failure when you relapse. You have failed, but it's not a stigma. It's not stigma. It's just you blew it. So get back on the horse.
Mm-hmm.
That's all there is to it.
How do you think that AA does compare to these other treatment programs?
I really have no statistical information to go on, and I don't believe the statistics that are put out by some of these high-priced treatment programs. They're talking about some of them. This is not AA's opinion. This is my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are talking about we have the cure for alcoholism. That is just patently false. I've never seen anyone cured of alcohol in 42 years.
Mm-hmm.
Cured would mean you can go back to drinking socially. I've never seen an alcoholic go back to drinking socially, a real alcoholic. Now, they may have had a little temporary problem where they're over-drinking a little bit. That's not an alcoholic. An alcoholic is somebody who cannot stop drinking, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've never seen anybody cured of alcoholism.
For you and your experience, going to the AA, having a group support system has helped you through this.
It has.
Do you go to the same meeting?
Not always. I vary it a lot. I have the privilege of speaking at a lot of meetings around the country,
Mm-hmm.
and so I go to meetings all over the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But locally, I go to 2 or 3 roughly the same meetings, but I vary it somewhat because it gets boring once in a while to hear the same people, talking about the same stuff.
All right.
So you have to move around a little bit if you're a little bit bored with a local meeting.
Walking into a new place and a meeting, do members come up and welcome the people that they know are new, or can you really
Yes,
kind
they
of
do.
slide in and not be noticed?
Depends on the meeting. Many meetings, if it's a speaker meeting, for example, a big speaker meeting, there's one in L.A. on Sunset Boulevard in the University Synagogue. Meets on Wednesday nights. There's 1,200 people there. And you can walk in and sit in the back row, and nobody will even know you're alive. But some of the local meetings where there's only 10 or 15 people, they're going to come up and say, "How are you?" and welcome, and want some coffee. They're very welcoming, actually.
Why is it that AA sometimes doesn't work for people?
Well, the
Or
short
a
answer
12-step type of program?
the short answer is they aren't working it, because I've seen hundreds of people come and go. They wouldn't do a fourth step, write down their character defects, their fears, their resentments, their selfish sex conduct. They won't write those things down. They don't want to share them with anybody else, and so they keep them to themselves, and it's like having ground glass in your system. And then they get frustrated or unhappy, and they get drunk. But my own experience is that most of the people that I see fail are people who haven't thoroughly followed the path of AA.
And when you say following the path, you really mean by following the 12 steps?
Doing the 12
and
steps,
doing
the
that.
first 9 thoroughly with a sponsor, and then continuing to do the last 3, on a daily and weekly basis.
So none of the steps are more important than the others, except for, of course, step 1, because you can't move forward without
That's
that.
right.
But
I'd say that's the most important step, and the hardest one to take.
Okay.
Who wants to admit they're powerless, totally powerless over a substance?
these 12 steps, they aren't just for AA groups, are they?
No.
I mean, it sounds like they are great principles to even live a life by.
They are. You'll be surprised to know that most people don't know this, but in the original Big Book, I have a first edition of the Big Book, 13th printing of the first edition. There's a story in the back of the Big Book by a non-alcoholic woman, a wife of an alcoholic. She's not an alcoholic, but she finds that the 12 steps have helped her enormously. And, of course, there's Al-Anon, which is the companion program for non-alcoholic spouses or friends of AA people. And they work the 12 steps, and they're not alcoholics.
And are they the same 12 steps in the programs
Yeah,
that are
they've
for...
changed the wording a little bit. I think they say they're powerless over alcoholism rather than alcohol, words like that. I'm not absolutely sure about it. That's the way they phrase it. But it's and other substance abuse people put in narcotics or whatever they're powerless over,
So whether it's sex, gambling, shopping, spending, yes, whatever it is, that this kind of a 12-step program is also going to be able to suit whatever
Yes, I believe
needs
that's
that they
true.
have.
I believe that's true.
Did your family members go to Al-Anon?
I got sober here in California. Most of my family live in the Midwest. I have one sister who lives in New Jersey, who is an MD. And she called me when I was 2 years sober, and I sent her a Big Book. And she read the book, went to the meetings, and got sober. She's sober 39 years.
That's great. Why do you think that it is important for other family members who are dealing with someone who has this issue to go to some of these meetings also?
It's a family disease. And sometimes unconsciously the family will sabotage the recovery.
And sometimes enable them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No question about it. Yeah. But they will subtly, they don't, who wants to have an alcoholic kid? I raised my kids to be alcoholics. Is that what I did? And so they will poo-poo the idea that they're an alcoholic.
So these groups that are for family members or friends really help them to get them on track too about how to help this person who has a
And
disease.
Just if they do nothing else than stop sabotaging them, they're making giant strides.
Does the alcoholic ever go to an Al-Anon meeting with their
Absolutely.
family members?
They do, sure. Some AAs are both Al-Anon and AA members because they have friends who are alcoholics, and it helps them to relate to the madness of the alcoholic.
So what would you like people to know, given that it is Alcohol Awareness Month?
I'd like to convey the message that there is serious hope for alcoholic recovery in AA. I can't speak for any other program, but I can only speak for AA as far as 42 years is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be sober 42 years at least, come to AA.
And I think part of what you've said also is that you feel that the program does work, and that if people come in and they work the program and they keep doing it and they do it until it works.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. The book says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the essence of it, thoroughly following the path.
So once more, if you would like to find an AA group near you, you can go to aa.org and click on the tabs that list the offices and phone numbers that are in your state, in your city,
Exactly.
and you can find the AA groups that way.
Exactly.
And then the local chapter again, that number is?
That number is 962-3332. And if you want to go down to the central office, it's at 1213 State Street.
Well, I would like to thank you very much for coming in and
I'm
just to
honored.
share your story.
Thank you.
And once more, I think that bottom line, what it comes down to is people helping people. And when we have
Precisely.
problems and when things come up, that if there's somebody else there to lend a hand,
Precisely.
that it helps everyone.
Exactly.
So thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Doctor.
We are going to go to our last break, and I'll be right back with you with some final words. I'm Kimberly Taylor, and you're listening to KZSB AM 1290. Many people who struggle with alcohol dependency or abuse are seeking out the help of AA, and they're going to all of the meetings to find that support and to find the knowledge to be able to support themselves in their own recovery. So I'm hoping that this brief overview of the 12-step meetings really does shed some light and makes it easier for someone who is seeking help to really walk into that first meeting and find other people there who have also been where they are. And I'm sure that there are stories that they are worse than you or better off than you, but nonetheless, there are people there that can help you. And taken as a whole, it does show that the research does pan out that the 12-step programs can be very helpful. And for many people who are addicted, to know that there are a lot of meetings and it doesn't cost you money to get there and to go to that it is definitely worth considering if this is a problem for you. I really want to thank my guest, Jim, who is a member of AA, has been there for 42 years, so I'm sure has seen quite a bit. And I thank him for sharing his personal story and his experience there in order to help others. We are all here to help, and some days we are the teachers, and in fact, some days we are the students. So thank you again for being here. So whether or not the alcoholic seeks out help, it may also benefit others to know that there are these 12-step programs for people who are the family members and friends, and they also can help you. What I would like to share is the number, which I'm going to give to you. You can do aa.org, and once more, you can tune into whatever your town or a city is, and you can find a meeting that is close by you. Again, thank you for joining me, and I welcome all of your comments. You can email me at drkimtaylorshow.com. You can also go to my website to find out how to download the podcast on iTunes and to listen to any previous shows. Just go to drkimtaylorshow.com. It's all there. These shows will be rebroadcast Thursdays at 10 p.m. and Sundays at 9 right here at KZSB AM 1290. And if you couldn't call in, you can still call me on Sundays. Go to Dr. Kim Taylor Show to find out how. I'm Dr. Kim Taylor, and I will be back next Thursday between 2 and 3. So in the meantime, have a great week, and let me leave you with this. Nobody else has to change in order for you to get better.